Okay, so the August 27th meeting of our group. Let me just point out one thing in case I forget to mention it later. Notice at the bottom of your agenda that our next meeting will be in the school board conference room, which is when you come in, you turn to the right and go down the hall instead of turning to the left. And the reason for that is that the city council has changed its meeting because of Rosh Hashanah. And the city council usually uses this for its pre-meeting. So rather than change the date, we thought we would just change the room. And that room is set up for recording. So it's really all the same. Yes, Kate.
And I should note that I will plan to be here unless I have city council conflict.
We got a lot of paper tonight. Sorry for all the paper, but it feels like we've got a lot of catch up on things to do. Let's do first a vote to accept the July 30 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
And Lenny, you have a question?
I did email in a correction to the minutes. I don't know if the person who wrote the minutes saw the correction.
That would be,
The spelling
I
of
think
Amanda's name.
I think that changed.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. A few updates. First, I will say Alyssa has let us know that she feels she needs to step down from the committee. She's got a lot going on and she has not been able to come to the last couple meetings and she knows she would miss the next few meetings. So reluctantly, she will send a resignation that will go to city council. They'll accept it. And she did say that she does want to continue working on the committee with Kate and Nancy on the LGBTQ stuff, open door sculpture. So she wants to continue some work, but she just, I think she feels super guilty that she's not been able to come to meetings for conflicts. So that creates a vacancy, and the vacancy will be filled by the mayor. Anybody can apply. You apply through the city clerk. And if you know of people, think about people who, you might want to encourage, knowing that this is an active committee and it would be somebody who, wants to pick up some of the tasks that you've all been picking up. It has to be a Portsmouth resident because this is an ordinance committee. Kate, anything else?
It would be really nice if you knew of anyone who had that architectural background, which is what we lose by
It would be
losing
very
Alyssa.
nice. Yeah. Yeah, good God.
And I'll just say, once it goes through the process, the city clerk would post the vacancy, so I can keep an eye out for that, but some of you might see it before me.
Yeah.
Once it's official, it'll be posted as a vacancy.
Yeah.
And then the applications.
And it really is important to talk to people because these things are elusive, and unless somebody like checks the vacancies all the time, you wouldn't know that there's a vacancy. Spiraling Serenity, we asked Vito DeVare for information for the plaque, and he sent us this, which I think is really, really wonderful and really explains what the sculpture is all about, and something that would go on a plaque that I think will help people to understand what it is and think about it. The idea has also come up that perhaps we could have some landscaping, which we would have to pay for, landscaping nearby that uses plants that embody the spiral. So something that probably wouldn't happen until next season, but something that we could think about and, would come from our funds to put forward. So plan for a dedication. Vito has asked us for what we have in mind for ideas. And Ernie, you just mentioned something that I think would work well for the dedication.
Well, he's a speaker, like a nationally known speaker, futurist. I was just doing a little research on him. He does some interesting stuff in AI, but I don't know if we want him to feature, speak just about this piece. But he is a, international speaker. So that's something to consider. But I was just thinking that maybe we could do, dedication at the site. And then Strawberry Bank is so close, so we could do some type of talk at Strawberry Bank, either before or after the dedication.
That sounds great.
And possibly something we could co-sponsor with Strawberry Bank.
Which would help us get the word out.
Yeah,
Something you could do, because one of the co-chairs for the Arts and Cultural Commission is Linnea at Strawberry Bank, as you could see if co-sponsor with the Arts and Cultural
that's
Commission.
nice. Yeah, that would be very nice.
Rudy, did you see anything, because you talked about art and AI? Because that might be an interesting.
That could be very interesting.
Yes, he, what did he say? I was kind of looking, he's done some TED Talks and I was looking, there was one that I looked at that was really interesting, artificial reefs in Naples, Florida, that
Oh, artistic reefs, right?
yes,
Yeah.
well, they call them artificial, but he does it like as a sculpture that's on the bottom of the ocean. And then with the intent that the fish will, a reef will form on it. And so he did do that, it was a while ago. That wasn't, it was like 12 years ago or 13 years ago. But I think we'd have to talk to him and
Yeah.
find out, he might want to certainly touch on the project here. But while we have this international speaker here,
Yeah.
it might be good to have him do something that's a little more, I don't know if technology and public art, because he's also done some
Yeah.
interesting things with, you look at a piece that you use your cell phone and you can go into different aspects of it that you wouldn't see just from looking at it. But, I think we need to talk to him and get some ideas from him as to, what would be available and what would be good for our audience.
Very cool.
Do you think he would charge, because he is a famed international speaker, do you think he would charge a fee?
I don't know. When Chris and I briefly spoke about it, I said, we should invite him. It's
Yeah,
his
see
piece
what
of
he
art.
does. Right,
I didn't offer anything.
yeah.
I didn't offer anything, and I'll just, as I'm listening, I'm hearkening back to, they were so excited to do this project. I would think having him tell that story of
Yes.
why,
Yeah,
why this futurist, this globalist came, picked little Portsmouth and was so excited about doing this project. It was pretty inspiring to work with these guys.
So was it part of the contract that he was supposed to come out and visit, or
no, we did not
No.
include that in the contract.
did we have to pay for him to come, or?
Well, we
That's-
might want to, as Sean said, we can ask. We might want to reimburse travel or something like that, but
We might.
let's see.
I'm a sort of appealing to his pride in the
Ego,
project.
right.
His ego. However, my legal cohort will remind me that he's quite a negotiator.
He's a dealer.
He's a dealer.
Yeah,
So, he might say, well, normally when people invite us, they do this and they do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And that's great.
Well, I was thinking, just myself as an artist, when I've done solo shows, I usually do an artist talk, like nobody reimburses you for that. You're so proud of your work and
Sure.
happy to present it, but I'm not internationally known. But yeah. But I was gonna say, if we're partnering with Strawberry Bank, if that were to come to pass, depending on what month it is, it might need to be indoors, would we have refreshments? or,
Yeah,
like,
I
how-
think we'd try to do it if we could, probably in October. It'd be nice to do it before the weather
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
bad, but with just this discussion, we can send him an email and say, here's some ideas. I think the idea of AI and art and technology could really draw a group of people.
Maybe a different group than usually would come to,
Absolutely.
unveiling of
Yeah,
Or something.
I mean, it's interesting. It seems like he speaks to a lot of business audiences.
yeah, futurist kind of thing.
Because I couldn't find a lot, I mean, I found some of the TED Talks. I couldn't find as much as I thought I would be.
You know, let's say he isn't available to come, just you're mentioning the TED Talks. We could still do a dedication and then view some of the TED Talks and invite people to like a Strawberry Bank to do something like that. An appropriate. one.
idea.
You could also partner with TEDx.
Yeah,
and
yeah. Okay, good ideas. Street Life, I think all of us except Mara and Beth got to go. It was great to be in the park.
Yeah, it's great.
It was just
It was really nice.
interesting to realize how big that park really is.
It was impressive.
It's very impressive. The North End Monument, I think you all got an invite to that. I will try to go. Are other people letting?
Yeah, I'm gonna try.
Excellent.
Especially having missed.
Think that'll be good, and especially since she came to speak to us. I think it'd be nice to see that. I don't know if Terrence's mural is going to be dedicated at the same time because, you know, he's done a mural there about this the Italian neighborhood. Do you know, Kate?
No one said anything.
So as far as we know, it's just the one.
Chris, jumping back to Street Life, was there any early indication of success for raising awareness for public art and funds?
Well, funds we can talk about separately because we had the other event. Awareness, yes, but it is a difficult, I mean, certainly everyone spoke to it, who was the speakers, the sponsors spoke very well to it. You know, Ben spoke to it. It's hard to know.
Yeah.
We were all
Ben
so
posted
aware of
about
it.
100 pictures. But he also, he kind of thanked everybody who was involved and speakers and just put a nice summary on it, on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Nice.
And I think you heard some like the Service Credit Union, I think everybody heard him speak at the cocktail hour all about their commitment to the arts, which is a great opening for us to go in and say, you know, thank you so much for sharing that.
And we're gonna follow up with Ben to follow up with all the sponsors to give them more information about the fundraising.
And another entree may be one of the pieces of art that was identified through the Cabot Lyford presentation is that
Right.
globe that's out at the Service Credit Union main building. So
Oh,
that's on the list of
Beth, that's
getting the
right.
research.
That's
That's right.
great.
And what did you call that? You had a name for it.
I didn't, it was the gentleman Jerry Ward
Oh.
put down armillary. I'd never heard of
I
that
have
word.
never heard of it either.
Yeah.
Do you know that, Mara?
No. Not at all.
That's a great connection.
Right? Giving you exposure. No.
The Culture Summit, Sean sent us all that. I don't know if anybody knows any more about that. Kate, do you?
I do. I'm trying to think if I have any more direct information. The goal of it is basically to discuss where do we go from here? Cuts that occurred in the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. So the goal is to get as many people involved as possible there to discuss that day about what we're doing moving forward in the arts and cultural scene. And so the Arts and Cultural Commission is going to try to attend. At least as many people as possible. There are a few that can't make it because it's a work day. But we would like to have as much representation as possible from the city there because we are in the state of New Hampshire, we are kind of the largest arts scene in the state, so.
So it's free, I believe.
Yes, you just have to register
register.
online. You just register. So, I don't know, does everyone have the registration link? If not, I can
I think
make sure.
Sean sent it to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and then by way of announcement, there is next Tuesday, another talk by the Portsmouth Historical Society, an interesting panel based around Cabot Lyford of his influence on younger artists. So that's on their website. Again, free. It's just about registering. It could be interesting. Let me mention one other thing that just came to us right before this meeting. Just to let you know, the Ferry House people are very pleased with the location. They're very pleased with how this is all going to end up. And they are actually going to present the sculpture to Park as a public art piece. And Ernie will go there not next Friday. The weekend of the 20th and 21st is the Ferry House tour. And so what they're going to do is have the Ferry House sculpture on display at the Strawberry Bank Visitor Center during that whole weekend, so people can see it and see it more close up, kind of, it'll be on a table, and then it'll be installed following this year's Ferry House weekend. So, but that all worked out very well after lots of back and forth. And Beth, I know you said you mentioned the inventory before that, and I think somebody asked you about a date. What's your thinking here, when you'd like us to try and do those?
I think if we could do it by the end of October, then we can have another inventory uploaded by then. And that's also going to include some historical pieces that Chris sent over to me. So we'll have a section on pieces that were here and are no longer here. So I've already done quite a bit of on that as well.
Do you know what I just don't see here? Is the spiral.
Right, we don't have the spiral yet.
Put that down.
And
That Ferry House tour. I
And
know.
oh, yeah.
So, and I didn't attach, what we need, but I think you're all familiar with the inventory now. You can
Yeah.
look at it online.
Yeah.
And those are the items. And I'll go around and collect photos of all of those. And if I could just add in here, we've been approached by 3 photographers, like real photographers, who've offered to send in pictures. So I said, just keep sending them to me. And as we receive them, I'll replace the ones we have there. So this is only going to get better.
because some of them have done some real artistic things with their photos, which are very cool. And I put it later, but Beth did a fabulous piece for us, which is a PowerPoint, the animated PowerPoint that selects 20, 25
At 25.
different sculptures. And they are just beautiful in terms of how they fade one into another. So we have that available. It's a big file. But it's, for example, we used it, we'll have Ernie talk about the launch that we did for fundraising, but we put it on the screen during that party so people could just see what was happening. So if you have use for something like that, like an event where you think it would be good to put it on a screen and let it go, you'll have to get it directly from Beth because it's just too big to send by email. Stephanie has it, I believe. So when we redo the website, figure out a way that it could be shown on the website, but it's really lovely.
That's cool.
And think about other ways we can use it. Yeah,
Yes.
it's really,
Yeah,
Now we have the framework. I mean, it's pretty easy. I'll just add more.
can add more. I mean, it might be the kind of thing we ask the library to put a display on at some point, because it just goes by itself. Okay, Ellen, anything you want to update us on?
Yes, I was asked to look at the space next door to this, the anteroom to the city council, as a place that might get used for displaying art. And I spent some time measuring things and looking at the room. I also spent some time with Sean talking about how that room gets used since I'm not here as much as he is. And he's familiar with how what ways the room gets used. The issues, one of the issues is that there are 4 columns in the middle of the room, so it does not, I did not think it was a good idea to have cases in that room because there's not, wouldn't be enough space for people to move around then. So what we're talking about is hanging art. And Sean and I were in there and the walls were empty. And today I walked in and there's a hanging system on the walls. I have no idea where it came from and neither does Sean. So very, I got in there somehow and we don't know. We will find out more about it, but obviously, yeah.
Well, I mentioned Ellen, I think months ago when this first came to Park,
Yeah.
it kind of came with an offer of, and if, you know, we need a hanging system like the library, it was sort of pre-approved.
Yeah.
And I think it got on facilities priority list
I see.
down here, and then eventually made its way to the top. And they did it. They didn't say anything. They didn't.
Right.
Excellent.
So I think that's how that happened.
Yeah,
But-
and one of the things on my list is to purchase an art hanging system, and it seems like we've already have an art hanging system. And then, but there's also the question of lighting for that space so that we could have a way to shine some light on the pieces that are going to be in there if this all goes through. The other piece that I've thought about but haven't really fleshed out yet is about an introduction to the gallery itself and what the idea is behind it. And then a second panel that would be a change, and that would be a permanent panel. And the second panel would change with the exhibition.
Yeah.
And also it might be possible, or I thought about the possibility of having something you could pick up from that second one and walk around the room, so we don't have to put signs on every specific item, but in fact use numbers
Yeah, that's
for
a good
those.
idea.
And I think that because it's not like we're a museum and we can repaint things every time that, you know, we're doing something. So it seemed like the idea of having a piece of paper or a board or something that you could walk around the room with that would correlate to the numbers of the items, and the numbers, that could be a very simple system.
So the numbers, depending on the size of the artwork that was hanging, like
Yeah.
if you had some really large ones or
Yeah.
some people had,
Right.
you know, a set of small ones, the numbers would be moved
Yes.
anyway, so
Yeah.
we'd still be changing.
Yes, but
Things on the wall.
those are just that's just a small thing, and or we could look at how we could attach it to the frames. And it's the beginning of this, and so it's just an idea to try to simplify and to also protect the walls there and to not get us into a place where we're constantly repainting or.
Well, for example, at New Hampshire Art Association, when we hang a show, there are clear sticker things that have, you know, the artist name and the title and maybe the medium, but they peel off without touching the paint. You don't have to paint it at all.
That's great, that would be wonderful.
I mean, the other thing that some galleries do is you take a photograph of it and just put it in a notebook.
Yeah.
You know, so that you don't even have to do anything like that, but you just see it.
Right,
Yeah.
well, I think we'll probably look into
Experiment.
several things and see, and it may also make a difference in how many pieces are in the exhibit. If there are a lot of them, then we might do one thing. If there are just a few because they're large, we can do something different. So and one of the things that I would welcome is to have some other people from this committee join me to,
I'm happy to do that, Ellen.
okay.
Yeah.
So I think that having, and if people know anybody else who would be interested in working on this, I don't think we need a big group of people.
Right.
3 or 4 people
Yeah.
would probably be enough.
I'd be happy to help.
But
Perfect.
Right up my alley.
great,
Great.
okay, thank you. So are there any other questions that people have or concerns or thoughts about?
Did you talk to Amanda Kid Kessler already or?
I spoke to Mandela Pruitt from New Hampshire Art Association, who sits on the Arts and Cultural Commission. And she does the curatorial work for New Hampshire Art Association for their exhibits, and she said that she would be willing to assist. So
And can you give me that name again?
Mandela Pruitt.
Thank you.
That sounds
So
like
I
a-
asked at the Arts and Cultural Commission if there was anyone.
Yeah,
Had
it sounds like
curatorial
a great
experience.
start.
I did try to find that person and I couldn't track
Find out?
down. Yeah, I couldn't track.
She's at New Hampshire Art Association.
Yeah, I couldn't track that down, but maybe I was just looking at the wrong thing. So
Yeah.
anyway,
If you call there or email there, you should be able to get her. She often works weekends.
Yeah.
Amanda has weekends off.
But it sounds like Mandela is the
Yes,
cur-
local.
the-
yeah,
well, or the person who works with her, so.
yes.
she is,
okay.
she is, and since she's already on the Arts and Cultural
Yeah.
Commission, she has a connection to the city and was willing to help, so.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts
Oh, I
about
think we're
this?
ready to go. It's
Yeah.
exciting. Okay, we'll pick apart. Ernie, do you want to talk about the launch event? And I brought,
Oh, good.
people can take something. else.
Yeah, so we had, so a lot of people were there. So chime in if you want to.
Just to take.
one.
Or you can take a couple.
Yeah.
To give the idea that there might be people that you.
Yeah, that's good. So I think it went really well. The purpose was to just, start the process, let people know it was happening, and we had a lot of potential donors there. We were very pleased. And I think everybody had a good time. I thought Anthony did an excellent job. I mean, you all heard him speak when he came here. He's just passionate and smart and, he's a great salesperson
Yeah,
for
he sure is.
for his project. So it was just a great night. We didn't have pledge forms available that night. I would do that differently if we did it again, because I think there were a lot of people in the moment that would have donated. But right now, our group of fundraisers met a couple of days ago, Monday. And we're assigned people, we're following up a fun job of asking them if they'd like to support this project. And so we're working on that. We're starting with the people that were there. And then we're gonna move on to the people that were invited and didn't come. And then we also have a whole big list of potential donors. So if anybody has any ideas as far as fundraising, please let us know. If you know someone that you think might be interested in this, and, we're looking for any kind of donation. Of course, the larger donations would be terrific, but we just want involvement in this. And so hopefully by next meeting, we'll be able to report back with some good news. We've also been working, we did a pledge form. Chris.
Yes, and actually, we should email that out to people. I
Okay.
didn't think about that, but I'll send that to you, Sean, so they can all have that. Yeah, I updated it.
To share that with the list with people, because I know that an organization my husband works with, when they're looking for money, the people who are on the board get a list and they kind of like check, they possibly if they're
That's a
if they're
great
personal
idea. Mara, that's a great idea.
contacts, you know,
Yeah,
then he'll say, Joe.
that's an
could you
excellent
possibly-"
idea. We can certainly,
So here's the one thing I'm a little wary about because that's public information when it comes
Through us.
from Sean. So I'm not quite sure how to do that.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, oh,
But we'll
that's.
figure that out. We'll figure that out.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't want that list to, be like a public document and anybody
Yeah, well,
if it
that's-
comes through us is a public document.
Right, and that
So-
was my question about discretion,
We'll
but I
figure it
didn't really
out.
understand fully
Yeah.
what you were saying, what you just said,
Yeah,
but.
I was thinking about how when you go to the music hall, for example, I was there last night to see the Temptations. And we had, you pick up their booklet and you see the list of all the donors, the really big Papa Bears and the Mama Bears. Down the list it goes to who's the donors. And when you read through it, I often see names of people I know and
sure.
oh, okay, well, I know another fundraiser. I know some people who like to donate to the arts. I mean, so
Yeah.
those are public information. If
Well,
they,
yes,
I mean,
but-
some are anonymous.
they
That's not-
donated.
That's not, they've donated and that's not the city.
Because we just have this kind of pie in the sky list of people, it's a lot of the, the usual targets and, but then we're also thinking creatively about, people who might
But-
have a connection.
A good thing to do would be for one of us to just sit down with you, Mara, and go, or anybody,
With
and go
any of
through the
us?
list. And so you could add and identify people you might know. And so that's, there's
That would
no
be
problem with
discreet.
that. It's not in the public realm.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that would be wonderful.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, because that's
We
even
all
in our
have-
small little group, that's what we've been doing,
Yeah.
people have friends. And, it's,
And we, by the way, this is the handout that we gave that night, but we do have a longer booklet that we can also email you. We should also.
it's
send
a
you
case
some-
study.
It's a little
Yeah,
case
so-
statement.
So
Yeah.
we'll share the pledge form, the case statement, one pager.
Yep. And then anybody that you could either make the direct ask or send our way.
Yeah.
Ellen,
One thing that I think is missing from this is a sense of scale. It's hard to know how big this sculpture is.
Yeah.
And I think
that's
that,
why you need the case statement, because it explains a lot more.
okay,
And of course, this was just for the people who came that night, so Anthony told them all that,
right,
but
that's right.
you're right, it needs a lot.
Yeah,
You really do need the case statement to get the full picture.
But that's a good idea. We could just add the 9 feet tall.
Yeah,
That'd be
okay.
easy to.
I just want to say, whoever did this printing and everything, I've had a couple of people mention how lovely these were, that this was just really nice. And I think it gave the whole, it gave it some weight and it gave it some really, it's like, ooh, this is really nice. Because it's not usually just a piece of paper. It was very lovely. The cardstock is great. So just shout out to you guys, because it's odd that people mentioned it to me,
it's
but they
worth-
did.
It's worth thinking about, yeah.
And Jack Siegel did the design. He's the young fundraiser that's been helping us and he's just terrific.
When you see the case statement. you
Yeah,
did a
so he did the
beautiful-
case. We look pretty professional.
Yeah.
Thanks to Jack. So we have that and then printed at what is the place on Islington Street?
Southport?
Image arts.
Southport?
I don't think it was Southport. It was the one that the P&H 400, it was the official printing. It might be Image Arts.
Oh,
Maybe
it's image art.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they did just the way it bleeds out the color is so strong. Let me think if there's anything else.
Well, we do need to do, you all had email responses to votes, but we should record those votes in this meeting, so because we're spending money. So I'll put forth the motion to, just a reiteration of the motion of spending $2,500 for the maquette, which comes from the money that we were given by Friends of Booth Blay. A second, Beth? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So who,
Beth, and then, I put it forth
Oh,
and then
okay.
Beth seconded.
Seconded.
And I'll do the same for the bookmarks, of which we have a number more printed. We had 500 printed as marketing material. The price was $207.71. Put that motion forth again to be paid from the Friends of Ruth Blay donation. And Lenny will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Yeah, normally we wouldn't want to do that by email, but because of the timing, we did it that way. Okay. Any more thoughts or questions?
So, Chris, is this something that you'd make an appointment and you'd hand to somebody and talk with them, or would you put it up on bulletin board?
The case, I wouldn't, this is
Double
really
check.
for you, the case statement, I would make an appointment and hand to someone. If it's somebody you know really well and you've talked to about it, you might just want to email them. This, because, the donation form has more information about, levels of recognition, things like that, the city's tax ID number, so this is really for you. I think the donation form and the case statement are what you would want to use with somebody else.
Where would I get that?
I'm gonna send that,
we'll-
I'll email that out. Cause it just kind of, the case study is something, if you're talking to somebody about donating, you're kind of supposed to go through it, and it talks about the whole park. And it talks about, I think it talks about park too.
Yes,
Um,
and it gives the budget, it answers the questions.
it's kind of talking points for meeting with someone. And if you have an idea of someone who you think might be interested, one of us is happy to go with you.
Yeah.
And when you present to them. Cause it's just like, I know with the Endeavor, like we had one of our largest donor, it was just somebody knew them and reached out and did the introduction, and then we went and met with them. And, they gave us a really generous donation. So it really works, because people are getting, they're getting so many requests, but when it comes from somebody they know, and it's a different story.
So, yeah, we'll report how we've done at the next meeting. The decorative bench, Bob Thorson has gotten, he does not have yet enough to come and present to us, but Sija Chen has worked on scaling back the design so it's smaller and more affordable. And the plan is that Bob would present to our committee. We may have some ideas that we want to recommend, then it would go to council, like we did with the Anthony. And so we get everything done at once. So that might happen our September meeting, or it might happen in October. Okay, the Vaughan Mall advocacy statement. And Nancy couldn't be here tonight, but Nancy prepared this, and Ernie and I weighed in a little. We wanted to bring it up because we'd like it to come from the committee, and we want to make sure that people feel comfortable with that. For those of you who went to, well, obviously we had the presentation here, but then a number of us went to the subsequent Vaughan Mall presentation. And there are three things that we wanted to bring up. The first is about the glass wall, and the idea that if the glass wall could also extend behind the stage so that it creates a more interesting, rather than just one flat glass wall, but it also makes a backdrop for the stage and creates a little bit more space in front of the stage. And people brought up at that meeting, and I think several of us agreed with it, that colored glass panels could look pretty dingy pretty quickly. Just because I mean, think of how your doors look in your house, right? When kids have been there, for example. And we've probably all seen how glass in public often gets, unless you keep it up just incredibly well. So there are some ideas here about texturizing the glass, breaking it up a little, some ways that could be considered just so that it holds better. And the second one is about our offer to help with, currently, the city's ordinances do not allow like projection, the kind that is held there, like you can't project onto a sidewalk your logo, for example. So we would need to I think we all liked that idea, but we would need to help work on ordinances to change that. And then the third thing really came from Nancy meeting with the LGBTQ folks who have attended those meetings, who felt that maybe the, I'm going to say the sort of overly symmetrical, very sort of standardized placement of things might detract from the organic nature of both Vaughn Mall and the kind of public art that might be there. So in other words, let's not just do 2 pedestals at each end. If we have other ideas, let's not just project 1, 2, 3, 4. If we have other ideas, we're not saying what those are, but just making sure that there's a little bit of looseness there. And then it ends by basically saying, we recognize it's early in the process. We're really thrilled to have been involved early on. We think there's room for more input. So that's basically it.
I think it's beautifully written and very detailed. If it's just for making them aware that these are our thoughts, I think it's perfect as is. If we are going to encourage them to take these into consideration and engage with us further, I think maybe we need to add a little line.
Something about being eager to engage with them further.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
next steps,
That's a good
let's
point.
connect, just something very simple at the
Yeah.
end that.
Or we
Or at the
engage
beginning.
with public.
Well, this is engaging with the planning group, I think, but this is a question of who this should go to. Right now we thought Peter.
It's the DPW project.
It's
It's
DPW.
not the planning and sustainability, it's.
Yeah.
It's the DPW.
So
project.
Peter's the appropriate. Yeah, Kate.
Right now, because it's a DPW project, it's being handled kind of in a way that is a little atypical. The way that we handle planning for major projects like this in this city. And I think it's important that it goes to DPW, but there's some awareness beyond DPW that there's commentary, because essentially I'm concerned about lack of enough public process for a major project in downtown. Because there had been a whole planning session already done on Vaughn Mall and Bridge Street lot.
Prior, like
Prior
10
planning.
years ago or something, yeah.
There was a whole plan
Yeah.
already in place, and while not this council, but just prior council, which was the same people, had just rescinded the Blue Ribbon Committee for Vaughn Mall because the idea was that that work had been done. That now that there's this new planning process, I fear that there will be a lot of community questions about how did we get here? The plans online don't match the plans that you're initiating.
Got it.
You had 2 public input sessions in the summer.
Yeah.
At the library. So I just want to make sure that there's adequate input, because I think a lot of the public doesn't even know that in 2 weeks they're gonna cut down all the trees on Vaughn Mall. Like not all, but like significant portion of the really tall trees. And so I think that's gonna be a little bit of a shock. For people to-
You think so?
Yeah. We'll have no idea that's about to happen. And so, so I do think that it can't just be internal.
It can't
my
just be public works, so.
Yeah.
But it's, so address it to Peter, but also share it with others. Share it with the city manager,
Serve the
obviously.
city managers.
Is there a vehicle, like I get it's probably all of you do, the weekly newsletter from
Yep.
the city of Portsmouth? I
Yep.
guess there a way to have some kind of link, like, I'm sure they're gonna say that work is starting on the
Yep.
Van Mall.
Oh, yes.
And then maybe there's a way for people to.
There's major
Reply?
projects, major DPW projects, there's often a project page, a separate link where people can actually sign up to receive a weekly email. I don't know if this falls into that category, but it's certainly a major
It might, yeah.
DPW project that is going to need to be updating the public on a regular basis. So
I was a little bit, it gave me pause reading about the glass design because, it's been designed by an artist and saying that people, I don't know if it was public feedback or Peter Rice himself who said, well, about the glass, like, it might be hard to keep clean, which is true. Maybe it should be textured, maybe there should be things embedded in it. And I thought, well, the artist might have something to say about that.
Well, sure, but it was public input and.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't saying that we're insisting on it.
Right.
It's sort of making some
I
suggestions.
was just thinking if it was texturized, it would look even dirtier because dirt would get trapped in all the little nooks and crannies.
and again, everything that's been presented has been conceptual.
Right,
It hasn't
right,
been
right, right.
presented by an artist per
Right.
se. It's really
That's true.
landscape.
Maybe that's the request, that when it gets to that stage, park has a role. I mean, I'm trying to think of a way to
A continued role.
yeah, make it more,
Yeah,
not just these are general ideas, but.
That's a
you
good
want to be
idea.
Involved, how?
I think that would really strengthen it, Beth. Yes, because it's not, it is unusual in that, and it is conceptual, that it isn't like an artist is doing this. Terrence has presented as a landscape designer some possibilities. He's not the artist who's doing it. That's the
It's technically
subtle,
landscaping
right, very subtle.
features.
So who would be the artist doing the
Well,
glass?
the city will
Well-
have to, I mean, I'm sure at that point, it'll come to us to help maybe
I
do an
don't-
RFP or,
Oh.
Right, and currently,
Good. I thought
to
it was
remind you of
parents.
this, right,
no,
nothing above ground is funded.
right,
So the city council will have the first crack at that.
right.
Oh, okay.
Nothing is funded. It's very,
Right. So that's why this is a tricky kind of
Right.
thing.
So Terrence might not do the glass wall at all. That was his idea, but if we did an RFP,
Right.
we could come up with 10 other ideas.
That's right. Or people would come to us with other ideas.
and yeah, it's a little complex. And again, I think it's gonna come down to where does everything land in terms of this is landscaping? DPW makes the call versus art
Yeah,
and others would be involved in the call.
Yeah.
That's where it's not necessarily settled. However, when you see Terrence's conceptual rendering, everything looks like art,
Yeah.
right? It looks very.
right, right.
Right, so but is it art?
Yeah.
I think we're just gonna have to stay dialed in and come alongside and make sure that
Yeah.
this group is
So
staying connected.
it reminds me, Nancy Carmer was at the launch event. And it reminds me that like 20 years ago, we had a landscape firm that laid out Bohenko Park as a sculpture park. No, they didn't do any sculptures. They didn't,
They just
they
put the
put
canvas.
the canvas down, where the plantings would go, the little berm, the serpentine.
Because that was landscaping.
It was landscaping. This is, if Terrence had done that analogous, he might have, sort of shown what it would look like. So I'm really glad we're talking about this because it's just different than anything else,
Well, I'm certainly getting a different understanding than before, so. I mean, when Terrence presented, I thought,
That's it.
I mean,
Yes,
and to
Laura.
follow up what Lenny said, I mean, I think that having gone to that meeting that you were at, it looked like this was a design that was a fait accompli.
Yes.
And what we seem to be saying at this point is no, it isn't.
It's
That was a-
early,
Well,
but
It was a it was a canvas, as you said.
So that's my concern, is that I want to make sure that there's enough public input
understanding.
before we get to the final design, that it is not just assumed that we're moving forward with the plan that's being presented, because we've only had 2 public input sessions, and there hasn't been public input, whereas we had a whole planning process for Von Mall with lots of public input and a design firm that came and designed already. You don't wanna just supplant all that work and say, oh, we hired somebody who did the plan and we're just doing it without making sure.
Actually, there've been 2 plans for,
I know.
so.
right, so there's history there.
Yeah, there's history.
And so
There's
you
something about Von Mall.
you wanna be really careful that you don't do something that's totally not what everyone else has planned and.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So are you suggesting, or is it not feasible, or that those plans be put on the table too?
Well, I think that they should be looking at them. At
See
least.
what might come from that, right?
Because these are adopted plans. So the reason I have an interest in this is that the city council goes through these processes where we spend money in the CIP budget to hire a designer to do
Yeah.
planning projects. And so it's wasted money if we don't then use the planning that we have done. So
so how old are the original plans? The other
Well,
one?
there's one that was like right before the pandemic, and then there's one that's probably 10 years before that. 'Cause Jen and then Laura.
So this sounds like a silly question, but why aren't they looking at the plans? And how did we jump over to this?
we're living in a different world than we were living in when those plans were designed. And so there's some challenges in the city around, some of the planning that was being done prior to the pandemic was planning in a world where things cost about half of what they cost now.
There.
There was a lot of, kind of, well, we could do these amazing things, but now the question is are they affordable and do we
Well,
need
and
to scale back?
having- Those plans were not about the underground, and the money is all going, so much has to happen now on Pond Street and Von Mall. And those plans were, maybe they anticipated a little of it, but nothing like what's having happened.
So the money's going to something much different than originally had thought,
Yes, and if you were planning,
budgeted.
some of these projects are large projects, so if you were planning for that project and initiating it, it would be different, but we're having to do this project now.
Got it.
Yeah.
So maybe the plan is a little scaled back or different, but we should still be referencing the plans and saying, okay, what are we going to keep?
So my question, I guess, following up on all of that is when in this letter, perhaps could that possibly be suggested as well, or some version of it, if we're saying we don't throw out the past or.
They were already emailed to the council. And we accepted them in our last council packet, the plan, that there was an email from,
Previous plan?
yeah,
So
there
it sounds like this council has that.
That's
we have that information. So this would be, so I would suggest this goes to the city manager, but also copy the mayor or,
Sure.
so that there's an element of.
So
That's good.
I'm confused if there was a plan 10 years ago and then there's a plan around the time of the pandemic, pre or post. How did Terrence come in? Like, why did we go to plan number 3?
Because
Yeah, he was hired as a landscape architect for,
by the firm that is,
The firm that is
Right.
doing the underground.
they're doing the underground work, because they have to put it back
They have.
somehow.
Okay.
And we didn't have in the CIP budget any planning for how we do Von Mall, the bigger plans for Von Mall. It just wasn't in the planning, the immediate planning for it. So
and knowing that they have to take out the trees because of the sewer and all that, they have to, that's an emergency when you think of it.
Yeah, I think it kind of moves the original plan to the side now. If it's a question of pulling in elements, that's a different issue. Right?
So
It's
if
not,
they,
can't just overlay the old plan because it's not,
Yeah,
so the underground work has to be done and then the landscaping has to be cleaned up, fixed something. But it's possible that they could say, well, we don't have enough money to do any artwork.
Oh, that's very
That's true,
possible.
because
Very possible.
Yeah.
none of the design work is funded.
Yeah,
Okay.
it could also be that, we end up doing some fundraising for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one piece, in case anybody missed this, I was at a meeting last week where they, DPW invited the businesses on Vaughn Mall.
Yeah.
Were you there, Counselor?
Couldn't be there.
And the message was, here's what's happening, here's what's being dug up. Here's how we're gonna dig up the center of Vaughn Mall, because that's where the old pipes are. And here's how we're gonna run a parallel water line. And then when we have to get other utilities that are closer to the buildings, that's gonna be a second dig. There are trees that have to come out because of the situation, not all the trees, but some of the trees, and it's gonna be ugly. And DPW is committed to disrupting businesses as little as possible, but there will be disruption. And here's what I want this group to know. When they're done with the digging and fixing underneath, it's gonna get like paved over
Yeah,
for the winter.
yeah,
It's not gonna look good.
yeah,
Safe,
yeah,
it'll be covered,
Right.
but it's not gonna be
Yeah.
pavers, it's not gonna be brick, it's gonna be,
yeah.
Asphalt.
So,
It's
Yeah.
blacktop.
So it's gonna be
so
ugly
it's
for a
gonna be
while.
ugly for
Yeah.
a while.
So that's also saying to me, so the value of what Terrence did is this is a long staged thing. So to be able to think about, like Bohenko Park, over a long period of time, how are we gonna be able to make this look better and contribute to it?
Can I ask Sean, what was the response of the business folk who heard this presentation?
Well, I mean, there wasn't, it was basically the construction meeting. It didn't talk about any of the design elements. It just said, here's the digging, here's how it's gonna start, here's what's going to happen. And here's how we're gonna make sure one of the two access points to the parking lot is available. Here's how we're gonna stay away from blocking your front door.
Yeah,
It was really
okay.
nuts and bolts. It was the pre-construction meeting for the tenants on Vaughn Mall. To give them some sense of,
Yeah,
we know you have to run your business while we're doing this. Versus the design conversation, which was very
But
different.
did they placidly accept this? Or it's like, what can you do? It's the
Well,
sewer.
when David Foster says, this is going to happen, we're letting you know, it's not option, it's really not optional, and they lived through the sinkhole, they lived
They
through
lived
the
through
sewer
all the
problem,
problems.
so they understand that no one's pushing back.
and they came to the,
Yeah.
that first meeting that many of us went
Yeah.
to and asked really good questions. I
Yeah.
mean, I thought,
Mhm.
I think they've been wonderful in terms of how they've
They
reacted.
understand, it's really not optional, and I think, I'd like to think that whether it's Commercial Alley or Market Street or other places, Islington Street, DPW has a record of doing whatever they can to disrupt,
Sure.
not
believe-
disrupt businesses, not close businesses. And that was the message.
So
Okay.
what I take from this, circling back to how Beth sort of started, is that we should just strengthen our park's desire to be involved. And I think we can strengthen that near the end. And then we don't have to vote on it, but are people then fairly comfortable with?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. That's good. This is, completely different. So plats, fun.
So after the last meeting, we talked, I volunteered. I really did. This was a true volunteer. We were talking about plaques and I did a little walk around town with some of the things that we have for public art and plaques are all over the board. So the goal of this is to really develop a standardized and something that's easily implemented, a plaque program. Again, lots and lots of questions in here. And for just the sake of time, I'm not going to go over every one of them, but it's really about the placement, the size, the design. Who gets to design it? How are we going to design it? The consistency of the design. And then we have lots of questions to answer because they're called plaques. Do we have to go with the city's sign program? Is that going to be an issue? don't know. I reached out to Stephanie. We had a lot of back and forth on that. And I think she and I are approaching it. I'm approaching it from this direction. She's approaching it from this direction. So in order to get to where I need to speak with her, we need to have a lot more information. Here's what we're proposing. Here's what we think is going to be a good plaque program. Then we can use some of the things. Because again, my questions to her were, do we have any size restrictions? Do we have a font that we have to use? Do we have colors that we have to use? What is there a format or things like that? Do we have specified vendors we have to use? Lots of questions that we need to come from, here's what we're looking for to do. And I think it will be a little bit easier and a little bit easier conversation. Stephanie's anxious for it, but it's just a matter of we need to get things together. So again, I don't want to take too much time, but I would love to have someone help me with this, because what I'd like to do is kind of what we did with the criteria, is come with, here's what we're thinking, and then of course send it to you and then have the feedback from that, and then we can move forward. But I think there's a little bit of urgency because we have the spiral and we
Have
want to
one.
make sure
Yeah.
that we want to get something in the works. So again, it would be kind of the standard on here's what we're going forward with. And then again, lots of questions on who's going to fund these. Do we go back and forth and do these? I mean, as you see, there's lots of questions to be answered and lots of decisions.
Stephanie?
She is the public information officer for the city. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah, that's her title.
Yep.
And again, totally open to it, but it's just, again, we are approaching it from two different angles.
Yeah.
Counselor, is a plaque a sign?
It depends. So here's the thing. This is complicated, but if this, so I'm working on signs right now for governance. If the city issues the plaques, then you can get around the sign
Do
ordinance.
whatever.
Yeah. But if the individual organization or entity, so if it's on private property, puts up the plaque, then it's a sign. So it's almost,
Yeah.
I almost think that you should have a standardized city plaque that people can, that they can request in some way or another for
that's
their
great.
piece of
It's a good idea.
art.
Great.
That way you can avoid
Yeah.
going through that
And
process.
I
That's
think
great.
that also means, one of your questions here, it makes sense that, to me, it's not part of the RFP. If we want to standardize
Mhm.
things,
That'd be
I think
perfect.
it probably can't be. We met Josh Dow at the
Yes.
launch event, who is the director of the Green Foundry in Elliott, and Jen and I were just engaged him in talking a little bit about plaques. And we said maybe we could pick his brain about cost. You know, they're gonna, of course, it's a foundry, so they do bronze. And we may want to do it that way, because city plaques and buildings tend to be bronze, and that may be an identifier of city-owned things, but I think we could have him come and just talk with us about what some of the options are and show us some of the designs and.
Like I said, if anyone wants to kind of work with me to kind of do some proposals so that we can come back and bring it on. Okay, that's great. So we can do this, come back and go, okay, here's kind of what we're thinking. And then we can go from there, because there's way too many questions on here to answer in a big group without a proposal.
I was just gonna say, think of something like the historical plaque program for houses, for historic,
Yep.
for homes in the city.
Yeah.
While the city of Portsmouth doesn't administer that program, the town of Exeter does theirs. So they have a standardized plaque for houses and you request it through their HCC. So we could have a similar, like you request one for the piece of art you have on your building. It's a city plaque and it's city designed and city.
Would we need an ordinance for that?
But you could have maybe a policy.
Okay.
I don't think you need an ordinance, but I think you could have a policy. And it might even be an internal policy to the Public Art Review Committee. If that's I would need to ask legal if you could do it through just an internal, like you have for your
Council
guidelines.
policy, yeah.
Yeah, and not have,
If you're confining it to public art, then that's the domain of.
Yeah.
it is, yeah. And if you. then
And
open
I
it-
don't think we could require anything on the private ones, but to have it available.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of private, because I was thinking of like the Stebbins did a piece of art in honor of
Yeah.
Mark Stebbins of Procon, and like I'm not sure if there's a plaque there or not. I can't
There is,
remember.
but there is, yeah.
So like would a private person who's putting up art on either could be commercial property that they own or maybe near a home that they own, land or something, but would their plaques also have to go along with the city ordinances, or if it's their property, they can do what they
Well,
want?
On an HDC, in something that goes through the HDC, I suppose it could be required. I think we'd want,
But
let's
those
think
are all-
about that.
We have to think, again, because there's two different, there's lots of different kinds of public art, and there's privates and there's public, there's something that the city owns. So again, we can't really, how do we require that? And if we offer it to them, that's very different. Because again, if you walk around, there's so much that's just, they're all over the board.
At least get the city piece locked.
Exactly.
Yeah,
When we get that one done, then we can offer it to them. But we just have to be aware of that is
Yep.
something else we have to deal with.
And these things are expensive, right? So.
Yes.
It's something we have to think about, how much, how big, how much we want to require. Do we want to go back? I mean, I believe Sean, you may remember, I believe the Ferry House folks said $5,000. Does that seem
For a
right?
plaque?
I'm not recalling that.
Because I think they were doing bronze, but that's why Josh could be very helpful to us, just so we can estimate what these things are gonna cost.
Wood carved, that would be less expensive.
Yes, exactly.
That's gonna last longer than the sculpture.
I know. That would be for our
Put it in
back
the
of our
historic
book,
section.
our historic section. That's right. Anything else? Jen?
No, I think, like I said, we'll work on that and get back to you next month.
Okay. I brought the Toni Morrison piece, because people asked, last time.
You need help?
Yeah. It's a text doc, so it's. It's hard to explain in words. But you can see,
That's really cool.
you can see the text. And
So-
acrylic over the text, and it's been canvas that's been repeatedly put in an elixir, so it's very stable. And designed to be unframed, to be, hung as a textile.
I read that and I read it was on canvas, which actually doesn't feel.
That's really cool.
Well, because it's been repeatedly bathed in.
Yeah, and so when I read that it was designed to be unframed, I assumed it was a gallery wrapped canvas, wrapped around wooden
No, no, no,
stretchers,
no.
but it's not.
No,
But it could be mounted easily on wood stretchers.
the museum, because the museum just puts it along the top so that it hangs as a,
About the curl.
well,
So that
I mean,
eventually
that shall come
fall
out, yeah.
It's beautiful, really beautiful.
So that gives you the sense.
Yeah. Mm.
And you can see the effect of the elixir.
And it has this really
Parchment
historical.
kind of. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, any other comments for the draft. It hasn't gone to council or anything. And that's based on our discussion last time, if there's anything else that needs to go in there.
It's more, just touching it though, it strikes me, it's how it's somebody who's destructive could just go snip.
Yes, that's true.
Chris, I had one question about the draft, when it says, and seek advice of the school department. What do we want to clarify the advice or just,
For location.
oh,
Yeah,
location?
so we should put that.
That was the only question I had.
That feels fragile enough that if it was in a, say, middle school, and some kid went by with a penknife or something, I mean, it could be easily
It
damaged.
would have to be out of,
Yeah.
out of reach,
Yeah.
yeah.
And true enough, I think that you would be able to see the, you know, the artwork from a distance.
Right, I mean, it needs to be from a distance,
Yeah.
actually.
I think if you were, for example, if you were coming down a stairwell and facing it, but it was hanging high on the wall.
Exactly,
Yeah, you would need
Yes.
a ladder to get up to it.
yes. Because it's not meant to be read. I actually transcribed the text because, for Phil Davis, the middle school principal, and it's excerpts. It's very hard to do that. It's excerpts from, the Souls of Black Folks. It's not
From the what?
from the Souls of Black Folks. It's from the classic, Du Bois piece. And it's not straight narrative. It's from
Mhm.
different portions of the text.
So it just looks like it's a page, but it isn't
Exactly.
a real page that's.
Exactly. That's what I discovered in
Huh,
doing,
good for
with
you.
the help of AI.
Who is the artist? again?
But you also say that
His
it's
name
not-
is, Romeo
I know, I remember.
Cannon.
Oh, there it is.
But when it says intended to be unframed, does that mean that framing it is a real no-no, or having it behind some kind of glass or?
I think you could, but like in a museum, they don't frame his work because it's just like you would put a quilt on the wall or a textile.
But at some places, if you put a quilt on and put it behind some kind of protective matter.
You might, yeah.
It could have a piece of glass off, you know,
In
away
front.
from it, yeah, just to protect it. And especially if it, I mean, we keep finding ourselves talking about it in a stair hall, and if it was exposed to light, you'd probably want
Yeah.
that to have tinted glass or special glass that would keep it from fading.
I think, maybe adding the considerations depending on where it's intended to go. All right, so this will go to council and then like the other council would send it to school board, I assume.
Yeah, there'd be a motion to refer to the school board for acceptance.
Then the one other thing there, and I've talked with Ernie and I thought Nancy would be especially good to take a first crack at outlining, because remember we said in September we would start to do a call for grants for the education trust. So Nancy will take a first crack at an application, an announcement, and a timeline, and present it to us. It before September, because we'd like to make sure that we kind of move on that. And if anybody would like to work with her on that, she's eager to have plans. But she'll take a first crack.
I would work with her on that.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's right, because you worked already on it.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, Ernie, tell about the grant application for Debbie from,
The Fuller?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, so I think, I'm not sure if we applied for the Fuller Foundation grant and I had shared that it was actually, you needed to send in a letter of inquiry. And then they let you know if you go to the next stage. So we did get selected to go to the next stage. And so we're working on that. Well, it's all been submitted and we'll hear in November. So my fingers are crossed. It was a lot for a lot of different reasons, but because when we got the original grant for Endeavor, we were a 501c3 because it was P&H 400. And they require a 501c3, so we had to get a fiscal sponsor and, but.
Yes, but the chamber does have a
Chamber.
501c3 arm. And they've offered to be a fiscal sponsor, so that is really good for us to know.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I can't remember what their foundation was, but it's very relevant for.
Arts, they have three areas that they focus on, and arts is part of that, and the Seacoast, so. You know, I hope.
But in addition to individual donors, if people have ideas for grants that we should apply for, like, local companies that may have corporate foundations or something like that.
Something the Native American angle.
Yes, we'd like to. think
Yeah,
about
if
that.
anybody has any ideas on that, cause definitely,
Yes. And that also reminds me to say, Anthony has been helpful. He brought potential donors, people who have already said they're interested in donating. And he will connect us with El Nova, because he's done work with El Nova. And we've also talked about potentially doing an event there that would be a fundraising event. So he's been very helpful in this aspect. And I think that's everything. Beth, almost everything got taken. We'll save a few for Robin.
Okay.
Maybe you want to send that
I
out to
will.
people, so.
Yep.
We have it on our list. Anything else?
Oh, what about the garage part? Is that still a?
Yes, we still have the money. We just thought we would try to get some of these other things.
Well, as soon as we had a
we
few.
decided to move it to the September meeting.
Yes, so that we can get some of these other things underway.
And Jen, so you signed up for the Service Credit Union, and we might want to talk about that, how to approach
Yeah.
them,
Good idea.
in the best way possible,
Exactly.
possibly. And by the way.
So I think we are adjourned. And unbelievably, it's Labor Day weekend. I was shocked to realize
I
that.
know. It's over.
Everybody will have a good couple days off.
Kids are back to school.
Just,
Oh,